Gotta love new WWF figures with real wrestling action. Jake the Snake Roberts versus the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase.
Yeah.
DiBiase lands a $1 million punch. Match Hulk Hogan against the Macho King Randy Savage.
Ooh, yeah, my almost master finish Hogan guaranteed.
Hogan slams him again. Match Andre the Giant against the Ultimate Warrior. Andre'll squash the Ultimate Maniac. WWF figures so close to the real thing, it's like being in the ring.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to the TV Toycast YouTube channel, and today we are bringing you episode 2 of Tales of the Toybox. I hope you guys enjoyed episode 1. It's available in the archives, of course, all about G.I. Joe Street Fighter. And on this edition, we are going to be talking all about WWF Hasbro. Stick with the Hasbro theme, at least for right now. But this is going to be WWF Hasbro Series 1. It's no secret to anyone who knows me or has seen a lot of my unboxings, as I unbox a lot of retro figures, as we know, based upon WWF Hasbro. It's been one of my favorite lines of all time. I was pretty deep into the LJN Wrestling Superstars at the time, which were kind of the main line of figures. And as a lot of you know, if you've been a figure collector for any number of years, back in the 80s and 90s, we didn't know anything. All of a sudden, just new stuff's on the shelves. It's like, whoa, okay, here we go. I guess that line's over, and this one's starting. And oftentimes, when you saw something new, it is usually exciting, but sometimes it's like, oh man, the old line's over, I guess. And well, it was interesting to see, how much the figures had changed. It was also really exciting because there was something about these things. Seeing them for the first time, they absolutely just blew my mind. And to me, it was like the greatest action figure I could have ever had. You go from a 8-inch rubber figure that's not posable to a 4-inch plastic figure that has literally an action feature, which is an interesting thing, and I've talked to people about this. I do have a big theory on the action feature that isn't really talked about a lot. I think the action feature is what sold the toys as far as commercializing a product, because if you go back to the commercials, it's always like the Macho Man doing his double axe handle, or maybe Big Boss Man doing his clothesline, or Hogan doing a big punch. It's always kind of showing what they can do, and that's kind of what sells it. Do we play with that? No, not really. I don't know anyone that did, but that was kind of a big factor for figures, especially of that era. A lot of the figures had an action. That was the thing, an action feature. And it's very interesting to think that that's kind of what sold it, but it does make the commercials exciting. It does make the figures exciting. Oh, they do this. Oh, they do that. And you're like, oh man, that's so cool. We don't really play with them, but it was always kind of interesting that they had that feature. And like I said, the WWF Hasbro line was easily a fan favorite, I think, for most of us. Most of us have some nostalgia for it. I know it definitely hit me in the feels the very first time I saw it, and I'll tell you that story real quick. I was at a Walmart. My mom was actually getting an oil change at Walmart, which I wouldn't recommend, but that's what was happening. And it's one of those things. She would do that oftentimes because you could drop the car off, run and do a little bit of shopping, and then go pick up the car in about an hour or so. Not a bad deal. Well, of course, hey, if we're going to do a little bit of shopping and just kind of mosey around the store, well, then I want to go look at the toys. And I'll never forget, I saw an end cap, and I saw that blue card, that bright blue card, and that WWF logo from a distance. And I was like, whoa! And you saw something new. I had to go see them. And that's when I first saw the WWF Hasbro figures. I don't remember exactly the ones I saw, but I definitely saw a bunch of them. And I did end up buying one that day. Just one, which is always kind of tough buying one wrestling figure. Really, any figure line is probably tough, but wrestling specifically, because now, who does this guy wrestle? Nobody, at least for a while. And I'll kind of show you how I got the entire, because I did end up getting the entire first wave, which was excellent. But I do remember just being so immersed. Like, as soon as I saw them, I had to get these. And even my mom was like, well, yeah, but your wrestlers are big. You don't need these. And it was like, I knew, it's almost like I just knew, even though I was 4 or 5 years old, like, that's old. I want these now because they are new, they're exciting, they're vibrant, they're colorful, and they just look so much different. And there was something about them for sure, and I think you all can agree, because it's still to this day one of my favorite action figure lines of all time. All right, so going back now through the actual figures here for WWF Hasbro Series 1, I'm going to go in order of how I got them, because in fact this line has made such an impression on me in my life. I remember each and every occasion of getting these figures, and so I'm going to go through them, and I'm going to start with the first four. So I mentioned before I was at Walmart. My mom was getting her oil changed, and from a distance I saw an end cap. And because where this particular Walmart, which I think they're a little bit different now, but the automotive was right next to the toys. And of course, you're being a kid, you're 4 or 5 years old. Can I please look at the toys? Can I please look at the toys? And especially at that time, if mom was not wanting to buy a toy, she didn't want you to look, right? Because that just avoids the temptation. But I'm like, please, can I look? And from a distance, I see that blue card, and it just was like, whoa. And like I said, this was such a gamble for Hasbro because these were so different than LJN. These weren't at all like what we had seen before, but I ran over to them and I saw so many Hasbro figures. I don't remember exactly all the ones I saw. I do remember specifically I did not see Hulk Hogan and I did not see the Ultimate Warrior because I would have bought those if I had. But I did see this guy because I picked it up, and that was the Macho Man Randy Savage. Oh, and what a figure it is. He's got those classic orange trunks. He's got the headband. He's got the sunglasses. And I love the pose. Like, the one arm's kind of out and the one arm's kind of bent. And what's so crazy about that is the arm that's out, like Savage did that jab, right? I'm kind of doing it behind the camera here. But the other elbow was almost at that 90-degree angle for that elbow drop. It was as perfect as it could have been. He's got the orange trunks, the yellow boots, and just such an amazing figure. It was like, as soon as I got it, like, I didn't know that they had movements, right? That was kind of a thing we find out later. I'm opening up and I'm seeing the movements and I'm like, no way, this is so cool. But just an amazing figure. And of course, we have to talk about the back of the package. Such a smart idea. You see the outline of the figure, but it's literally line art, right? There's no color. So you see all these figures, but you really don't know what they look like yet. You know what's out, but you don't really know what they look like. And I felt like that was a smart thing where they're showing you everything that's available, but they're not throwing it all at you. Very smart move by Hasbro, in my opinion. And it may have just been a cost-cutting measure. I don't know, but I always like that. Of course, we got the cutout bio cards there for Macho Man as well. So, yeah, Macho Man was my first guy, and I remember ripping it open in the back of the car and then seeing that his arms went up and down. I'm like, oh, this is so cool. And then shortly thereafter, I was at a store. I believe it was also at a Walmart. And I was able to pick up, and I think my grandmother bought me this one, but it was my second figure. It was the one and only Jake the Snake Roberts, and man, was this guy perfect. Like, they did him so good. He's got the snake, he's got the green pants, he's got the snake skin boots. The details, though. Jake didn't wear knee pads. His figure showed that he didn't have knee pads on. Jake had the arm, like the fist that it would come out and do the punch. Jake did the jab. Perfect. And, also, the arm was kind of cocked back so you could do a picture-perfect DDT. Absolutely incredible. And then, Jake was a little bit more of a belly guy, and his figure had the belly. It was perfect. Such a fun figure. So now I had Macho Man and I had Jake the Snake, and I could have a match. And from that point, I remember my parents, and I don't remember the situation, but I'm sure you can all relate. Being a kid, I am with my parents, because, you have to be. And, they were either buying a car or they were doing something where they were talking to a guy in an office. That's what I remember. And if any of you remember those situations as a kid, you're there and they're talking to the guy. There's two chairs, so you're literally sitting on the floor. And I remember sitting on the floor and I had like my back to the chair and I was just sitting there. And this is before the days of smartphones, right? Obviously. Bored out of my mind. And it was probably just like an hour, but it felt like 6 lifetimes. But I remember my parents said, if you don't say anything, we'll go buy you a wrestler. That's all you had to tell me. I mean, you could have told me, hey, don't say anything, we'll give you $1 million. That wouldn't have been as good as buying me a wrestler. And so I remember they took me to a Walmart, which was not a local Walmart. It was one in the area. Right, so now let me ask you guys that. I know a lot of days, a lot of us toy collectors, we hit multiple Walmarts. It didn't really happen as a kid. My parents weren't going to take me to all these different Walmarts all over town, right? It was like you go to your local Walmart and you just hope for the best, and that's basically it. Well, I was at a different Walmart, which always felt like, oh man, they're going to have all this different stuff. Years later, we turned out that was actually accurate. Like, they did sometimes have different stuff. You just never knew. We see that all the time nowadays. I'm looking all through, not seeing any wrestlers. Oh my gosh. And of course, the classic, oh, that's all right, we'll get you one later. But I don't want one later. I want one now. And looking all around, and unfortunately, didn't see any. And then I turned the corner, and apparently I was in the wrong aisle. Because my mom was standing there, and she had two figures in her hands. And it was Axe, and it was Smash. It was Demolition. And, oh man, to get a tag team and to complete the tag team, that was insane. So, I actually got 3 figures that day because we found a third one, and I was able, because I was so good that day, I was able to talk him into that one. I'll tell that on the next part here. But yeah, Axe and Smash. So that completed my first 4. And like I said, this roster is kind of a who's who. So like we've already talked about the back of the carding, and the cover art of these, the card art, and everything else. Like I said, they were absolutely incredible. But I also thought it was cool that Demolition's figures said Demolition on the card. So you got the idea that they're a tag team, because we wouldn't see tag teams really come around until a little bit later. But Axe and Smash, they went home that day, and it was a great, great day. All right, so I just talked about getting Axe and Smash from the Hasbro line, of course, and I mentioned that while I was there, I also got another figure, which we didn't even see until we were heading to the checkout, and that was the one and only Ravishing Rick Rude. We saw Ravishing Rick Rude, and of course I had to have that as well. And his Hasbro figure's probably not considered the best, but it's Ravishing Rick Rude, and it was his only Hasbro too, right? And a lot of these guys, I mean, realistically only got one, right? Some guys got a second, but that was not for everybody. And so I was very happy I was able to pick up Rick Rude that day. So I got 3 new Hasbro figures that day. It was definitely a good day. The next Hasbro figure I got, he was a guy that liked to do a little strutting and a little cutting, and that is Brutus the Barber Beefcake. And I remember my grandpa gave me money. We stopped at a Walmart, and that's the one I picked up. And he also had an accessory. He had his shears, or just his giant scissors, as I thought they were at the time, but his shears. And I remember walking through the grocery store because he was a jumper. And I believe he wasn't the only jumper. Ultimate Warrior was also a jumper, but that was the first jumper that I had for the line. And I remember being like on the ground at the grocery store, having him jump, and I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. And that's, again, the thing about the Hasbro line. I didn't always play with the actions, but it was really cool that they had them, right? And I think most of you guys can agree with that. It was just a really fun feature. And so I got Brutus the Barber Beefcake as well. Then we go into a birthday party I had. So this birthday party, it was probably in 89. Might have been 90. I couldn't tell you for sure. But I ended up getting 6 wrestling figures that day. This was probably one of the best birthday hauls I can recall. I got a Pillow Buddy, Macho King Randy Savage. Awesome. Definitely got to cover those on here sometime. I got the Hasbro Wrestling Ring, and I got 6 Hasbro figures, which completed Wave 1. And I'll talk about the first 2 here. 2 classic villains and a tag team at times. First up, I got the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase. Oh, man, how cool is this figure? He's got his signature suit. He's got the $1 Million title, which was an amazing accessory. The only knock I ever had on this one was that it's like, okay, he didn't wrestle in his suit, so I always wanted him in the trunks, which they did later do, I think, in the purple cards, but it was several years later. But he was also a little smaller. It was almost like he was a little too short for the line. And not a huge deal, but it did always kind of bother me a little bit. I'd like to get your guys' thoughts on that, because Ted was not a small guy. He wasn't the most beefed up guy, but he wasn't a short guy. So having him a little shorter always did kind of bother me. But I also, that day, got his sometimes tag team partner, the 8th wonder of the world, the one and only Andre the Giant. And man, what a figure this was. Andre was massive. His hands were massive. His feet were massive. He had the headbutt where you could kind of pull him back and do the headbutt, which was like, is there a more perfect move for an Andre figure? We later saw that with Akeem, We later saw that with Dusty Rhodes. We later saw that even with in the Mattel Retro line with like Kevin Owens and Samoa Joe. I think the new Solo Sikoa has that as well. But just awesome. Andre the Giant. And it was Andre's only Hasbro. So that was really cool to get. Because again, keep in mind, 89, 90, we're in the dying days of the LJN era. And Andre was pretty well done. I think one of his last wrestling appearances was WrestleMania 6, at least for the WWF. I do know he made appearances and did some stuff after, but his health and his physical appearance was definitely never the same. So yeah, that was the next 4 figures. I ended up with Brutus the Barber Beefcake, of course, in his classic pink with the shears. Simply Ravishing Rick Rude, the $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase, and of course, the 8th wonder of the world, Andre the Giant. But that birthday was not complete. I also got another tag team, kind of. It was definitely a tag team, but not one that I think a lot of people always put as a tag team because they look so different. First up, the man who's serving hard times from Cobb County, Georgia. Easy for me to say. The one and only the Big Boss Man. He looked awesome. The police uniform. He had the nightstick, so he had an accessory. There was just something toyetic about the Big Boss Man. Now, this is heel Big Boss Man. We had a little bit of the fatter body. They redid it a few waves later, and it was a vast improvement when we got the good guy Big Boss Man. But that first one, absolutely incredible. And even now, when Mattel does a Big Boss Man, because they've done a few, I always think those are just fantastic. And they even gave us a Chase the Boss, which I was a huge fan of. I was like, yes, this is so cool, because, again, he did that in WCW just for a little bit, because I think they threatened a lawsuit, but seeing him in that same type of gear, but with a black shirt, so cool. He even wrestled in Japan, I think for All Japan a little bit, as the Big Boss Man, which was really, really fun. So that was a fun get for me. Akeem, the African Dream. I didn't even know who Akeem was. True story. When I got the figure, had no idea who he was. Had never seen him. Of course, as most of you probably know, he was at one point the one-man gang and then became Akeem. Didn't bother me a bit, though. I just thought it was awesome. And, of course, they were the Twin Towers, as most of you guys know. Wrestled at WrestleMania 5 against the Rockers. And then I think they had split up by WrestleMania 6, and that's when we kind of saw the babyface run of the Big Boss Man take off. But, yeah, Akeem, another one. He did the headbutt, had the hat, the freaking big old sweater. It looked more like a sweater than like a big, long shirt that he was wearing. But still cool to get. And then, of course, probably the cornerstones of this line. I got the last 2. We'll start with the one and only, the Ultimate Warrior. Again, that Ultimate Warrior LJN was one of my most prized possessions for many years. Thought it was an amazing figure. Getting him in as a Hasbro. He had the green trunks, the white boots, the snarl, the ripped up body. He was a jumper, which again, it made sense because he did the big splash, right? His hands were up, or you could put his hands kind of up like he was jumping at you. Such an amazing figure. Getting him was like, wow, I got the Ultimate Warrior. And then, of course, the Hulkster, Hulkamania. He's running wild. And, it's weird. I know around this time was kind of like the start of like the beginning of the end for Hulkamania. We're starting to downward spiral. You couldn't have told me that at that time, though. I was a huge Hulkamaniac. And getting that figure that day was one of the coolest things ever. Said Hulk rules on the shirt, of course. Had the headband. Even the back had the shirt tears, which was kind of a trademark of his. And then, like I mentioned before, I got the ring, and I got the Macho King Pillow Buddy. And it was one of those things where when I got all those figures, even my mom, she was like, "You've got all of them now." And I'm like, what? Now, at the time, you don't understand, like, there's going to be a second wave and a third wave and so on and so forth. But at the time, I owned every figure, which was incredible to me. Because I'd already had 6, and then I got 6 more for my birthday. It was an unbelievable haul, and I was so happy to have all those. I never completed a full Hasbro collection. There's still a few that I am missing here and there. But I will tell you guys a story as I kind of wrap this up. Just a few years ago, I was at my parents' house, and my niece and nephew and my sister had moved back in with my parents for a bit, and I found a Psycho Sid bone crunching figure in the garage. And I asked my nephew, I was like, "Where did you find this?" He goes, "I found it in the attic." I'm like, "Were there more in there?" He goes, "Yeah." So let's go take a peek in the attic. And I found almost my entire original Hasbro collection. I mean, I'm talking Dusty Rhodes, Demolition, Heartbreak Kid Shawn Michaels, The Undertaker, Razor Ramon. I found almost everybody. I think after I kind of dove in, I realized from the original collection, the only ones I were missing was like 4 figures, which was pretty insane. To be able to find all those, it was a true, like, unbelievable moment for me in my life to be able to say, wow, I've got them all. And like I said, this line means a lot to me, and it always will. And that's why I think I'm so big on the retro figures, because there's something special about these figures, and they mean so much, because it was legitimately one of my favorite toy lines of all time, and still holds up to this day. I think you can put the WWF Hasbros up against almost anything, and they will really they hold up because they're an amazing action figure line. And that's all I got for this edition of Tales of the Toy Box. Hope you guys enjoy it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Check out my unboxing videos. Check out my new show, What's on the Pegs. And if you have ideas for the next episode of Tales of the Toy Box, I'm going to try to drop these about once a month. That's the plan. Let me know. Drop it in the comments below. Or you can shoot me a message over at TB Toycast on any of my social media platforms. And we'll think about it, because I'm already thinking about what the next one's going to be. And I don't have a clue yet. But I do know one thing. It's going to be a lot of fun. So thank you guys for checking out the TB Toycast YouTube channel. And we will see you in the toy aisle.